So, welcome everyone to our April session, the free educational EQ sessions, and glad that you are here. For those of you live, as well as those who could not attend but have requested the recording, and hope it'll be enriching for all of you. So, with that, I actually remembered to note to you guys that in these sessions, we typically run for about 45 minutes of content, instruction, interaction, and then I try to give you about 15 minutes for any questions for clarification and such. But I also wanted to let you know that, I mean, we're taking a fairly deep dive here. So if you're in that place where you're going, wow, I'd like to learn more about that. Well, there's some free resources with Spirit of EQ that you can take advantage of. So, for example, today we're going to be talking about recognizing patterns, and that content can also be found in our podcast. You can go to whatever platform you go to um, for your podcast, and you can do a search on recognize patterns and things of that nature. And you can find additional content that'll go even deeper just to kind of reinforce the learning that you're getting here today. As well as we are also on social media. And we do have a actual private online platform. It's our Spirit of EQ community. That one is one of which I think Anna as well as Belinda are on, and it's one where we provide more educational content for you as it relates to, again, things EQ and otherwise. So those are just some free resources you can access. If you have some questions about those as we get to the end, I'm more than happy to answer those for you as well. But let's go ahead and get started with the session. And as I mentioned, we are going to be talking about recognizing patterns and specifically around the patterns that are found in ourselves. And it's probably not lost on you that all of us have patterns, the ways in which we do things, as well as the sort of the reoccurring stuff, right? So what I'm hoping today will do is to help you be aware of this reality more intentionally and understand that there's great power in understanding what our patterns are and how they may be impacting not only ourselves individually and our relationships with ourselves, but with our other relationships, be they personal or whether they're from a work perspective and those kind of things. So with that, I'd like you to think a little bit, though, about where we've been. So last time we were together, last month, we talked about enhanced emotional literacy, which was ultimately this idea of understanding simple and compound types of emotions and the importance of education around that. We talked about how those particular things, those particular emotions, the more that we know, we're better able to have language attached to that particular emotion, and we increase our chances of not being left flat-footed, if you will, when we encounter those emotions. And this is sort of the next phase of that. But in consideration of that particular reality, um, we're in an area we call a pursuit called know yourself. And that's probably pretty obvious to you. This idea of clearly seeing what you feel and do. It's kind of like, again, this idea that you kind of have a good sense about who you are. You have a good understanding. You could tell the world about yourself because of the knowledge. And we realize that this is an ongoing thing. This is not a one-time arrival deal. It is a constant getting to know process. And as I'm doing this, and I'm just going to stop my share for a minute, I'd like you to remember that everything that we do here today is designed to keep you in a what I would call a safe place. Now, don't get me wrong. I feel like I'm in the presence of strong people, powerful people. I know you're not going to wilt at the beckon, right? But you also need to feel like, okay, I can navigate this space and this environment without me having to worry about whether or not I'm going to have something that's going to trip me up. Again, I know my gut tells me you've got the strength, the ability to get up from a fall. But I just want to make sure that you understand that the dynamic of what we do here includes that, and that is psychological safety, if I can term it that way a little better. So I'm going to go back in and we're going to take a look at a video that I think you'll find very powerful. And actually, no, I'm sorry, I'm getting too far ahead of myself. Just some key things to keep in mind about recognized patterns before we look at the video. So recognized patterns, the definition is acknowledging frequently recurring reactions and behaviors. Now, here's the thing you must keep in mind. These patterns are happening whether you're conscious of them or not. What we're advocating, right, is that we want to get to a place where they're no longer just happening in the subconscious, but they're happening in our conscious mind, meaning I can take time out. Maybe I take a step back or I go up to the balcony and I look and go, what are some of those things that happen on a regular basis in my behaviors, my reactions, what have you? And then slowing down to observe what's happening inside of me. And what we're trying to move to is what we want to move to is to build a practice around this competency. And by that note, I'm going to ask you guys to do something fairly quickly, right? I'm going to give you a little bit of time to kind of think it through a bit. And if you feel comfortable, you can unmute yourself and share, or you can type in the chat. But think about it. What's a recurring pattern for you? Maybe it's your recurring pattern when you and your boss are at odds about a project. What's a recurring pattern in that regard? What's a recurring pattern with your partner, your spouse, when it comes to making plans for a vacation or the future? And I'll give you a great example just from my personal life, just to help set this up for you a little bit, right? So when my son, for example, he is an 8 on the Enneagram. And if you know anything about the Enneagram, someone who is an 8 is what you might consider to be a driver. They have an aggressive personality. They like to push. And for the life of me, I don't fully understand it, but they get energy from that pushing, right? So when I discovered this in his personality some years ago, it helped me because then I could see my patterns a little better. So for example, he likes to push buttons. He thrives on conflict. Well, before knowing this, my pattern was roll my eyes, give a great sigh, be quick to say, don't even start, just don't start, right? When I became more aware of my pattern, I could get into that mode of, okay, Eric, you understand. Typically, he's always going to thrive on that conflict. And typically, what you do is you react immediately. So let's begin a process of slow it down and maybe respond instead of react. But here's where I'm going with this. If you do not slow down to take that process, at least in some form or fashion, you may find that you're always at each other's, quote, throats about stuff. And you may not be fully conscious of why. So as you think about what those patterns might be for you, and you can fill in the blank with any other area of your life, are you happy with them? Which that's not a trick question. You may actually be happy with them. Do they need your attention? Do you need some time to maybe take a step back and evaluate?
Yeah.
So as you think about that, whoever would like to unmute, I think you're there, Sydney. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I suppose just kind of as you were speaking, I had a thought because I was trying to think of, what are my patterns? And I think the one that really kind of springs to mind is I have a tendency to cut people off. That's kind of I think I don't know whether it's life. I don't know whether I was born this way. I don't know. But my kind of, I think I have a high threshold for kind of dealing with conflict and disagreements and all, and potentially even disrespect, albeit it's relatively thin. However, there are certain boundaries that cannot be overstepped, and the moment that they are overstepped, it seems as if though nobody's safe from the snip. Um,
Yeah.
so that's definitely sort of a pattern that kind of I've recognized in myself, and that on one hand, uh, I suppose I value it because I suppose it's a protective characteristic, and it has the ability to protect me when I need protecting, or if I ever need protecting. But
Right.
then it's kind of getting that balance between do I need protecting, or am I just not overreacting, but am I being unreasonable in kind of cutting people off? And it's almost as if though it gets to a point where it's like, well, you serve me no more purpose. Bye. And yeah, so
Well, Sydney, I'm so glad that you were willing to bring that up, because that's really a great example of what we're talking about here. And one thing you also need to keep in mind, everyone, be curious. This is not a call to find out whether or not you're a good person or a bad person, whether you're patient or impatient. It's a call to, let's just look at it. I would say to Sydney, hey, Sydney, maybe you should carve out some time to evaluate. When is it a protection mechanism that's rightly placed? When is it you're just kind of on edge, or you're kind of perturbed and it's just a go-to, right?
yeah,
Sydney, in this case, will be the one to decide what is useful and what is not. And then you move toward that growth, right? Because here's something that's very important to keep in mind. Our choices are about 90% of our makeup of life. And I'm not saying that as a scientific certainty. I'm saying as a lived experience and what I've encountered and understood from others, right? That about 90% of your life is based on the decisions and choices you made, right? And if we all were to really be curious and not judgmental and honest about it, we could probably look at our lives and go, you know what? Where I'm at today, 90% of it is based on what I chose to do, whether it was a good choice or a bad choice, fill in the blank. And please understand, this is not, again, hey, you should regret what you did 10 years ago. That's not the point. The point is that today is another opportunity for you to get better at that process of making optimal choices. Recognizing patterns is a key way of helping you make those better choices. As Sydney was kind enough to share, it's understanding the difference. When do I need to use this pattern to protect myself because it's right? And when do I need to hold back because it's just a selfish motivation? The better we can get at that, boom, the choices improve along with it. All right, so I promised you a video, and I'm going to share it with you. And I want to get your thoughts on it after we take a quick look.
Ed said the most important thing is film study. Why? Because you have to watch yourself repetitively over and over and over again doing the same things.
I'll never forget this. The first time I met Ray, he said, believe what you see and what you study. What you study on this tape and what you see, it's gonna happen. It's just a matter of time when.
Me and him always used to say this. You can fool us once, but you will never fool us twice. This guy, they're gonna put this same formation and they're gonna flip it. But this same play, I want you to watch. I hesitated. Go. You saw me? Watch this. Hesitate, hesitate, hesitate. Go block. Right. Now watch this. A few plays later, that same play gonna come back to haunt him.
If you got beat on the play the week before or in the first half, they gonna come back to it. Like Ray said, they came back to the play.
Same play. Remember, this time, the tight end was on the line to the right. That's why the game is so repetitive.
Believe
It'll never
it.
change. Look,
Believe
you'll
in
never
it
get me
now,
twice.
guys.
You'll never get me twice.
Believe it, man. Believe it.
The game is mastery, guys. If you're playing against Peyton, and Peyton comes up to the line and he sees Ed cheating, he check it. If Ed checking, Ed looking at me saying, Lou, we got to switch that. We check. Brady come to the line, Brady checking, we checking. Switch that, switch that. No, we got to go to this side. No, tight end going to go on motion. Right. But when you have to play against minds, every little thing is a chess match. It ain't checkers. In college and high school, y'all playing checkers. Usually the best player can double jump and do all this. Man, when you get to the league, partner, it's a whole nother ball game. If you trust each other on defense, man, you're great together. It don't matter. Kelly Craig, eat up. Eat up. I engage him. 1 yard loss. It's beautiful when you put it together. When you really put it together, it's beautiful to watch.
Constant communication on defense.
Constant communication.
I mean, every snap. There's not a time when you shouldn't be talking to each other.
We had a rule in Baltimore. We practice one way.
All right. So, whether you are a fan of the American game of football or whether or not you are in another sport that you love immensely, hopefully you caught some things in there that relate to the idea of the importance of recognizing patterns. I've used this in other sessions, and I may have used it with you guys at some time in the past, but the idea is that what's your game film look like? When was the last time you looked at your own game film? And that's what recognizing patterns is all about. Notice the words they used about what you see, communication, and the communication doesn't necessarily mean it's between Anna and Eric. Primarily, it's Anna with Anna. It's Eric with Eric, Sydney with Sydney, right? It's, okay, this is what, okay, here, I'm with this person, and typically it's a Friday, and I know typically this is what usually happens. I need to be ready. But oftentimes people will just fly without even a thought. This is your opportunity to move again from this subconscious behavior into a conscious one. All right, so give me some insights. What did you guys think? What leaped out to you in what you saw in the video? You can unmute, or if you feel free, you can do the chat too.
So I love football. And if only life had a replay screen where we could actually physically go back and look at different situations, that would be great. But sometimes I know for myself, like in certain situations, I'm so emotionally charged that even when I try to go back and think through and process, okay, what just happened? Sometimes I can't decipher it. I can't decipher. Sometimes it takes me a while to be able to decipher because like I said, I'm a very much reactor. So I react to things rather than, okay, and one of the things you taught me was taking that pause. And sometimes I have to remind myself to take the pause. Otherwise, I'll just react. And so being able to slow down and allow your emotions to settle down and then replay or look at, okay, what just happened? How did I react? And really being able to pick out, okay, what is that pattern? So.
Well, and for the rest of you guys here in the session, Belinda is a former client of mine. I worked with her one-on-one in a coaching relationship for probably close to 2 years. So she said those kind things. Belinda, the check is in the mail. And I appreciate it though. So what Belinda described, right, is not so strange. I mean, we all probably have areas, relationships where things are emotionally charged. And it seems like a constant heated or a constant, bubbling up of emotion. And Belinda hit it right on the head. If you can begin a practice, build a practice of just slowing down, a conscious decision that I am not going to react, even though I got this storm going through my brain, you will be you will gain great benefit from that. And there's some science to that too. And I think most of you know this, is that when an emotion comes, that 6 seconds period and science says it's about 6 seconds, there's all kinds of chemicals and hormones and peptides flowing through your brain. And it makes it really difficult to get to an optimal decision or choice when all that's happening. So the wisdom is, all right, I'm feeling angry. I'm going to give it about 6 seconds before I give an answer, before I make a choice. Because what we have found is that when you do that, those chemicals, hormones, and peptides start to recede. Prefrontal part of our brain, the decision-making part of our brain, can take over and make a more optimal decision. It does not happen overnight. It does take work, and you're not going to be perfect at it. But you know, there's a cure for when you make a mistake. It's called, I'm sorry. My bad. I'm sorry. I screwed up. I shouldn't have said that. It's when you don't do that when it can get really bad. All right. Any other observations from the video before we keep moving?
Yeah, no, I think for me it was yeah, the point in which I think is right at the start where he said, you know, you've got to rewatch your you know, your moves. And I think it was quite telling where it shows the hesitation you know, in the first kind of play, so to speak, and then sort of the second one. I really kind of I valued that. And I think just to sort of, this is just something that that also kind of a thought that I had as is it, did you say Belinda?
Belinda, yes.
You know, I think as a person, I've always been quite lucky. I say always, I think as more so as an adult, definitely as an adult, and as I've grown older, um, you know, I think that replay function, I think that it would be great if we had it. I feel like I have it, and I think it comes in the shape of reflection. So really kind of going away and really reflecting, and you know, oh yeah, I said this, and actually it was at this point that I actually got really frustrated, is because, you know, I was fine until, you know, she said that I couldn't see my son, and then that's what, you know, that's where the, yeah, where everything kind of went sour. And I can kind of almost envisage that. And I suppose what I'm trying to say is, if colleagues on the call can obviously and have that, then trust that, because that's kind of, yeah, it works for me sometimes.
Well, and here's the other thing I would say within that, in that reflection, and the reality of that we are going to make the mistakes, guaranteed, for every single one of us, right? We're going to have things we can look back on and say, ah, I wish I wouldn't have said that. I wish I wouldn't have done that. But think about the people in your life who are always willing to own their mistakes, whoever they may be. Could be a parent, could be a partner, could be a friend, could be, think about them and how you feel about them. I know the people in my life who do that, they rank really high, because I don't expect anyone in my life to be perfect, because I'm not. But the willingness to take ownership is a powerful tool as we all are trying to figure out this thing called life. All right, so let's get back into the meat of our session here, and I'm going to pull up my slides once more, and we're going to take a look. Here's just a couple of things that I'd like you to reflect on, just again, as we go forward. You know, what stood out for you, and maybe how can that apply to your life and what you may or may not be doing. And generally speaking, the competency, this idea of recognizing patterns. This is Marie Claire. If you remember her from history. And much of what we're talking about is experimentation. And I really firmly believe that if we can experiment without judgment and be powered by curiosity, we position ourselves to do better and continually grow in this idea of making better choices when it comes to all the various disciplines, or I should say facets of life. because it really is not about what you haven't done. It's more about what will you do? What will you spend your time from this day forward? I think that's the way to, if for lack of a better way of saying it, get this thing called life a little bit more ordered. All right, we're going to do a little exercise. It's called the Think, Feel, Act practice. And it connects very well with this idea of recognizing patterns. Whenever I'm giving a presentation around EQ, or if I'm in a coaching relationship where we're looking at assessment details, I typically will tell people that one of the best ways to describe how EQ enters our life is in the following, is that there is an event, then you will have a thought, emotion will follow typically, and then you're making a choice, right? So what I'd like you to do, I'm going to give you just a very brief scenario, and then I'd like you to write down, and then if you don't need to write down, just kind of keep it in your mind, and then I want you to share if you feel so comfortable. But what is it that you're thinking? What is it that you're feeling, the emotion? And then what would you typically do next? So I'm going to give you an event. You write down what would you think, what would you feel, and then how would you act? All right? So, and again, you may have to use your imagination a little bit here, just because I don't know everyone and their life circumstances and situations. It might not apply, but just work with me from an imagination standpoint. So your boss calls you into his office or her office and says that we've been getting complaints from our clients about your performance in your business engagements with them. So what would you think? What would you feel? And how would you act? And I'm going to give you just a little bit of time to process that a bit. I don't want you to just, because I'm not looking for a right answer. I just want you to, what would you think? What would you feel? And then what would you typically do? And then whoever may be ready, please go ahead and share.
Okay. I'm gonna jump into it.
All right, Ken.
All right. Well, and this is yeah, I mean, this is pretty relatable. I mean, for me at least, that it's you could apply it to a few situations, but I mean, thinking off the cuff of some type of, I'm assuming, negative, judgmental, concerned reaction to somebody was, well, first I'm thinking, I conduct myself with respect. So what is the reference that they are criticizing? So my first inquisition to think is, what is the foundation of this? What's our reference point? What's our datum? What's our where are we starting from? So my feeling is of pure curiosity, because if I am a self-respecting and collaborative, team-oriented professional, now maybe there's some confusion with that, and maybe something got misinterpreted in terms of tone. If it's a communication issue, most of the time it's a tone or intention that is misaligned, that maybe can jar someone. So that's my feel, is of, okay, I'm a blank slate. And usually, to go back to a couple of points that were made on the previous thing about reacting and over speaking, I find myself compartmentalizing what I personally think and feel, and leaving space for just the blank slate, the foundation, the core, the root of where are we? What are we talking about holistically? Where is everybody coming from? And then what is our intention? Like, what's our goal? Because we all are obviously coming from different perspectives. So I try to find a space within my ego to be I don't know, like not omnipresent, but just neutral. So, empty my cup so somebody else's tea, and I can understand that. So that's what I'm feeling, is just
All right.
leave room
And
for
you
that.
just described, Ken, your what you would do, because you were describing that intermittently, and
Yeah.
that's great. And guys, please understand that this is not a formula that you must follow, because I love how Ken had a different nuance to it. It fits him. And though it didn't flow exactly as I described, again, because the object is not, hey, follow what Eric says you must do to be emotionally intelligent. I love it because it's like, okay, more than likely what he just described, he's going to make a good decision. And that's what we're trying to get to. The good and optimal decision.
Work and personal, so.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, who else? Based
So
on that.
immediately, Eric, I felt as soon as you start saying the scenario, I could feel myself already reacting, like on the inside, like, okay, what did I do? Right off the bat. But then I started thinking about it, like, okay, so first of all, I would ask, okay, who was the client, and kind of replay back, okay, what happened when what was the discussion, what was the scenario, to kind of figure out, okay, was it a situation where they didn't like what I was telling them, if it was wrong, or if I had a bad day that day and I was maybe a little snippy. So just kind of getting, like Ken was saying, a baseline of what was the actual situation, because it could have been situational, not so much an ongoing thing. So
Yeah.
just trying to get to the heart of, okay, what was this specific situation? And
Yeah.
then, but I had to get past that initial reaction, like, okay, what did I do? Okay, how do I fix it? Okay, because I'm the type of person, I don't like messing up. I don't like making mistakes. I don't like, somebody saying something bad about me. So I'm like, okay, I'm already in my mind trying to fix it. But then it's like, okay, wait a minute. I need to find out what exactly was said and why.
That's awesome, Belinda. Thank you for sharing that. And what I'm going to ask you guys to do, and this one is not participation, I'd like you to reflect for just a little bit on, now that you've observed a pattern, what would you do the next time maybe your boss calls you in and says there's a complaint? Or it could be with your personal life. What you fill in the blank. What would be the more optimal process for you? And that's the value of this exercise of recognizing your patterns. You can look back on, you can reflect on, and then build a new way of doing it if you need to, because what you may be doing now is the optimal. But more than likely, you probably have certain areas in your life, be it personal, professional, otherwise, where you'd like to see some growth. You'd like to see some improvement. And this is kind of a template that you can use to help you. Again, the idea here is to improve our decision making, right? And the recognizing of patterns is a key one in moving us toward that. So as we get close to the home stretch here, I'm going to bring us back into my slides, and I'm going to show you something that I feel can really be impactful beyond. And this short video is going to give you some insights into the role that the emotions are playing into the dynamic of this recognizing of patterns. If for no other reason, I think it's also, it kind of in a covert way explains why we should be paying attention and should be recognizing what our patterns are. Let's take a look.
What's the secret to developing control of emotions? The answer is a bit of a paradox, and it starts by understanding a little bit more about what emotions really are and dispelling one of the biggest myths that gets in the way of developing control of your emotions. Many people think about emotions as something that just randomly happens, that they come out of the blue like some storm, and lightning strikes, and we move into reaction. And we've almost all been told that there's some emotions that are negative and some emotions that are positive.
I don't want any negative emotions.
I don't understand.
And, that we want to be happy and we don't want to be sad.
No, I only want the positive ones.
But there's a bias in that, and it's a bias built on a fundamental misunderstanding of what emotions really are. So what are emotions? They're automatic neurobiological signals to help us adapt to opportunities and threats. In other words, they're little nudges to help us pay attention to what matters. Emotions are not something that we are. Emotions are something that we experience. And we experience emotions because they're signals that are there to help us survive and thrive. It's part of the way our brains are built and the way our brains work as social animals to help us adapt and work with others. As we stop thinking about emotions as negative and positive, and instead start thinking about them as something we're experiencing in order to give us perspective and help us figure out our way through a challenge, all of a sudden the view of emotions begins to shift, and it starts to become much more clear that the secret to developing control of emotions is actually feeling them more, not less. Let me give you a metaphor. When I was young, my stepdad had a little challenge with parking tickets.
Sir, we're at the Beverly Hills Police Department. Are you Mr. Sidney Bernstein?
Yes, lucky guess.
Well, sir, you have 25 unpaid parking tickets. We have a warrant for your arrest.
What? No!
He would get a parking ticket, and he would put it on a pile on his desk, where unfortunately there were quite a few other parking tickets, and he would ignore it. And then he'd think, oh, I have to take care of these, and he'd get them organized, and maybe he'd put them in a box so he didn't have to look at it.
I have unpaid parking tickets.
Controlling them. And then he'd start getting notices that said, your parking ticket is overdue, and now there's an added fee. And he'd go, I don't know what to do with this. I'm going to control it. He'd stick it in that box. And then he'd get another notice that said, your parking ticket is way overdue. Now you have a $100 fine, plus the late fee, plus the parking ticket. And guess what he'd do? Put it in the box. Pretty soon, he would get orders for court appearances. And he actually had thousands and thousands of dollars worth of fines and parking tickets that he had to pay. We might say that the problem was all of those parking tickets and fines. People kept asking him to take care of that. And we might say, oh yeah, you should control that because it's a problem. But if he had just gone back to the very beginning and put 25 cents in the parking meter, he wouldn't have gotten the ticket in the first place. In other words, if he had tuned into the need, if he had paid attention to what was going on way at the beginning of this chain, he could have avoided all of these challenges and complexities that kept piling up. This is what happens with our feelings. When we feel something, it's a message from us to us. And if we say, oh, I don't have time for that, or that's a negative feeling, or I shouldn't feel that, we put it in the box. And then the situation continues. And we get another emotional message saying, you're not paying attention. This is a problem. Look at it. We said, oh, I don't want to feel that. Let me put it in the box. And pretty soon, it's really hard to deal with. But the solution to developing control of our emotions is not to stick more things in the box. The solution is to put the 25 cents in the parking meter. The solution is to notice the feeling when it's small, before it starts mounting up and getting complicated and difficult, and just tuning in and saying, oh, that's interesting. Oh, this feeling is giving me a nudge. At a neurobiological level, that's what feelings are. They're these little nudges that help us say, there's a problem. There's an opportunity. pay attention. If you want to develop more control over your feelings, the solution: feel more. Feel earlier. Tune up that detector. Learn how to put the 25 cents in the parking meter, which means feeling your feelings when they're small. And you'll find that that box on your desk doesn't get so overwhelming. Now it's your turn. How will you develop control of emotions?
All right.
What's the secret?
So before we conclude, at least from the presentation perspective, I'd like you to consider these three things. So based off of what you learned today, based off what you've seen, whether it be in our conversations or whether it's something you saw in one of the videos, what do you want to put into action in the next 30 days as it relates to recognizing patterns? Consider, how will you do it? What will be your process? What would be the plan? I highly recommend that you don't try to tackle the mountain in 1 month. Maybe you just carve out a small thing that you want to put into action and then build from there. And then how can Spirit of EQ support you? That one may not be a one-size-fits-all thing. I mentioned to you at the beginning of the session that our podcast, as well as we have an online platform dedicated to EQ, those could be areas of support. Maybe you need something more, something deeper, something more on purpose, but we want to be here to support you. So with that, I'm going to stop my share. I'd like to get any feedback that you might have about that video. It's one of my favorites. He does a great job, especially the example of his stepfather and the parking tickets. So feel free if you have some observations from the video you'd like to share, and we can also combine that with any questions that I could answer for you as it relates to recognizing patterns. So feel free to unmute or use the chat as you feel so led.
I think maybe what he was getting at about, what did he say about the emotions, like feel them more, or it's yourself telling yourself something, that it's about mindfulness, and so maybe focusing on that as a philosophy and doing some reading on that helps bring that poise of awareness.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ken. And this makes me think about, we all have people in our lives, and I'm sure maybe I've had those times too. I'm not maybe, I know I have, where you were just in this repeated behavior and you really didn't know why. So you've heard the expression when people say, I don't know why I always get so angry. I don't know why that person makes me. And in many ways, because it's a subconscious thing, it might be you truly don't know why. But maybe our opportunity is let's start looking at all that stuff, maybe all those patterns. And again, if we can do it with curiosity and stay away from judgment, we might position ourselves to go, oh, now that's why I typically do this when I'm in that. So great observation, Ken. Who else? Whether it be from the video or if you have questions for me around recognizing patterns.
So for me, out of the video, man, just first of all, as far as pretty much letting stuff pile up, a small situation, and because you don't really want to deal with it, it mounts and it becomes this giant molehill. I mean, even with emotions, and him talking about even dealing with those emotions when they're small and not negating the negative emotions. I know for me, that's one of the things I don't want to deal with the negative emotions, the anger, the frustration. I don't really want to deal with those roots because they're so uncomfortable. And so I have a tendency to try to put them in a box, but then they crop up other places. And because if I have found that when I don't deal with those negative emotions when they're small, they create other problems and other things that could have been avoided or prevented or not be as blown out of proportion if I had just dealt with it on the onset.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would say, Belinda, that you're not alone in the universe, and I know that all of us may have those areas. I heard an interview with a gentleman. I don't remember his name. I apologize. But he made a comment in this presentation about that he has found that oftentimes the thing that we most avoid is the thing that would lead to the best outcome that we're looking for. And man, again, we all have different areas of our lives, right? Where things are really solid and, you know, moving well, but then there's the other ones where it's kind of a work in progress, or then there's the others, fill in the blank with relationships and all of the above. But I am of the mind that I would say, yeah, I agree with that for some reason, right? And maybe it's the resistance part. And maybe it's the way that our brains operate. You know, one of the primary jobs of our brain is to protect us. And if there's a conflict or confrontation, or if there's a subject or whatever it may be that we're avoiding because we don't want to deal with it, it could very well mean that your brain is trying to protect you. But all of us have the power over our brain to let them know if there really is no danger there, right? Our brain is not a moralist. It's not going to sit down with us and have a polite conversation about whether you should or you shouldn't. It's an operating system in many respects. And to that point too, I want to just stress to you guys, if you took a group of neuroscientists and put them in a room and talking about emotions, you'd get a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different theories. So it's not me saying that what we're talking about today is absolute first and last. It's the one that we run with. However, I just want to give due credence to others who may have a slightly different view. And that typically shows up in the positive, negative emotion thing. I do agree with the video, the presenter, that there really are no positive and negative emotions because they're all derived from our brain for purposes, right? But there are some emotions that they do kind of connotate negative, a la anger, rage versus joy, and those kind of things. So that's an aside. What other questions might I answer for you as I bring it to the close?
Yeah, I think I was just going to add to, I mean, I've sort of captured some notes that help me that will help me sort of be on this call. And just touching on what you mentioned about there not being sort of any negative, sort of no negative emotions or no negative, no positive emotions. What I kind of wrote just is emotions, are the same and can, some emotions, all the emotions are the same, basically, i.e. no positive, no negative, and they can't be controlled. I forgot the T there. They can. Well, they can and they can't, I suppose, but they can't be controlled. And the reason why I say this is because sometimes we might want to be stern or serious, but if you've got a really funny person in front of you, they're going to make you laugh because, and you can't control it. But then equally, you may want to and desire to be very cool, calm, collected during, a disagreement. But if the other person knows how to trigger you, similarly to the humorous one, but if the person knows how to trigger you to get that kind of negative sort of eruptive response, again, it's very difficult to control that. But again, they're all emotions at the end of the day, and it's just, I suppose, like you said at the start, your brain is trying to sort of put you into survival mode. Your brain is trying to get you to survive, basically. So it was just some of my takeaways, but again, just food for thought for colleagues.
Good. Thank you, Sydney. All right. Anybody else? And then I'm going to close this out with a personal story that hopefully will try tie a bit of a bow on today. Any other questions I could answer?
not so much a question, but I just signed up for Jordan Peterson's newsletter, and the first point of the first message that was sent to me was, conflict delayed is conflict multiplied.
Whoa. Ken, if I were handing out a prize, you'd get that one. Whoa. That's good. That's really good. Well, here's to us and the courage to tackle the conflicts early, right? By way of personal story, I've been married. I just celebrated 34 years, right? So I've been married 34 years, and this will show you that there's things that you, even after 34 years, you discover, right? So, and it wasn't a planned conversation, but my wife was telling me that she doesn't do well with big emotional responses from people. Like if someone rushes in with a she's like, I don't deal with that well. And she went on to explain to me why. And I know this won't surprise you. I feel in my gut it won't surprise you. It's something she could trace back to childhood. All right. And after she told me that, it was like, oh, that's why when she does that. Now, she didn't make that statement as an arrogant, hey, I'm this way and you're just going to have to live with it. It was a discovery moment. It was oh, now I'm understanding when that happens, this is what goes on. And yes, she was the winner in this because she's learning more about herself. I'm also learning because now, guys, guess what? Whenever I observe these big emotion moments, I can understand, hold on, Eric, she's probably not going to do well if there's this big emotion rush. So whether it's me, and quite frankly, she would even say, it's good to be married to me because I'm more of a calm. I'm not the big heightened guy. But if I start to find myself going down that road, because I am human, I now have a pattern that I can refer to. Oh, no, if I want a good result and I want a good choice, I need to wait until these emotions, right? So guys, this is a process and it's a one, and I want to make it clear, it's not like tomorrow, it's just like that. It's not magic. It's a work thing. It's a practice thing. It's being intentional around all of this. So with that, I'm going to stop the record button. I thank you all for being here today. And I'm going to tell you